now we're going to talk about Lewis and Tolkien because there's no two writers that were greater at bringing together Athens and Jerusalem and bringing together reason and imagination. In fact, the reason that C.S. Lewis is the greatest Christian apologist of the 20th century and one of the greatest of all time is that he used both his reason, his left brain, and his imagination, his right brain, to make a compelling case, not only inviting us into the truth of doctrine, but inviting us into the sacred narrative of creation, fall, redemption, reconciliation, and glorification. The real magic that tries to control things is much closer to science than it is to religion. Francis Bacon coined the phrase, knowledge is power. We have knowledge over nature and we can control nature. And that's what the dark magic is all about, the control and domination of nature. That's not what true religion is about. It's not about domination. If it is your will, Father, follow it. So he starts, again, because, again, we have this idea that the magic and superstition, that's Christianity. But he says, no, that the dark power got caught up with the modern science that wanted to use science in a technological way. Rather than understanding God's creation and praising him for it, we're going to use it as a weapon to control and dominate. Jesus' parables are fictional short stories invented to teach us a lesson. So fiction is not evil, okay? Mm-hmm. Everything has its place in the order of God. So we want to be careful because I think a lot of us still have that idea that fiction means a lie, right? Tolkien wrote a poem called Mythopoeia, and he talked about how C.S. Lewis, when he was an atheist, said, well, myths are lies breathed through silver. But he still thought they were lies until, as we talked about last time, Tolkien explained to him that the reason Christ sounds like a myth is because he's the myth that came true, the myth that became fact. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Mm-hmm. How far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. Whither then, I cannot say. Good stuff.
Was that live, by the way?
Oh, it was
perfect.
Live. There we go.
That's
Okay,
the way to start it. Good work, Bennett. All right. Well, we are back with Dr. Louis Markos. We are not recording at 2 a.m. like our last one, 2:15. This is
almost 12 hours
normal human times. This is like 1:40 in the afternoon. But yeah, we had a great conversation last night. Looking forward to this again. Again, for those that don't know, you're a professor for 34 years at Houston Christian University, which used to be Houston Baptist. And you published 30 books covering kind of classical education, which we talked about a little bit more last time. Not so much education forward, but we talked about Achilles to Christ, some of the ways that, connecting Jerusalem and Athens and the way that God, kind of made himself known through some of the pagan realms and whatnot. So he was able to communicate himself when he came in the fullness of time. Great conversation. So we're going to piggyback off that a little bit, and we're going to get into a handful of your other books. But really, our main focus today is going to be on reinvigorating the imagination and the Christian mind. And we're going to lean on Lewis and Tolkien, which for those that follow this know that those are two of my favorites. But here we're sitting with a world renowned. I mean, you've published multiple books on both of these individuals. So that's going to be a really fun exploration. But maybe as kind of an intro, if you can just kind of talk a little bit about kind of your core thesis of kind of all of your works that we covered last time, just to refresh, or for those that missed the first episode, to kind of get them on board with where we're going. Good.
Well, it's great to be back on. We talked a lot about this in our previous podcast. Can I call this a podcast? I guess not.
Yeah.
We can call it a podcast. Okay. Bill O'Reilly gets mad when you call him a podcast.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he gets very mad. But so my basic thesis is, in all my books, one way or another, I want to bring Athens and Jerusalem together. I believe that the Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian legacies belong together. They strengthen each other. But together with that, I have a passion to bring back the classics, to bring back the great books of the Western intellectual tradition, Homer, Virgil, Dante, Shakespeare, all of Plato, Aristotle, all of it that needs to be part of the great dialogue. I want to enter the great dialogue, and I want to invite my readers to enter the great dialogue as well. But to buoy that up, I believe that reason and imagination must also work together. Just like Athens and Jerusalem, we need to use our mind, we need to use our reason and our logic, but we also need to use imagination. Houston Christian University has a very good masters of cultural apologetics that you can also do on my own son did it remotely. And what's unique about calling it cultural apologetics is and I've written a lot of apologetics books, it's not just the logical, scientific apologetics, which is important. It also includes the use of the imagination, literature, film, all of that sort of stuff. We need an apologetics that appeals to the full person. We have to escape, and in all my books, I'm trying to escape what is sometimes called the Enlightenment split, where something is either reason or imagine and nothing in between. It's either history or it's myth. There's no such thing as what Lewis and Tolkien and Chesterton called a true myth. Christianity is a true myth. It's true because it happened, but it's a myth because it speaks to the deepest yearnings and desires of the human person. It answers the questions that we have. So in all that I do, I want to make use, we might say today, of my right and left brain together. We want to be holistically offering ourselves up to Christ. So our reason can honor him, but so can our imagination. And we spoke a lot in the previous podcast of how you can't really understand the Bible fully unless you understand literary genres, because the Bible uses so many different literary genres, and you can't understand it fully unless you understand what the writer is trying to do. Well, now we're going to talk about Lewis and Tolkien because there's no two writers that were greater at bringing together Athens and Jerusalem and bringing together reason and imagination. In fact, the reason that C.S. Lewis is the greatest Christian apologist of the 20th century and one of the greatest of all time is that he used both his reason, his left brain, and his imagination, his right brain, to make a compelling case, not only inviting us into the truth of doctrine, but inviting us into the sacred narrative of creation, fall, redemption, reconciliation, and glorification. And so today, I'd like us to talk a little bit more about the Inklings. That's Lewis and Tolkien and others, but a group that got together and had the courage to use the Christian imagination, even to the point of writing children's novel and fantasy and sci-fi, because all of that speaks of God's creation, of God's cosmos. And you know, Brian, it's always ironic to me that Carl Sagan, who was essentially an atheist, called his famous show from 1980, I think it was 79, The Cosmos, because he doesn't believe in the cosmos. He believes in a universe, but the word cosmos is a Greek word that means an ordered universe. Cosmos is the same root as cosmetics, because the cosmos is the beautiful ornament of God. So he doesn't believe it's a cosmos. He believes it's all random, right? Billions and billions of stars and all that sort of stuff. But no, we talked a lot last time about Lewis's book, The Discarded Image, in which he lays out for us the beauty of the medieval cosmological model with all of its correspondences horizontally and vertically, with its meaningful universe where parts of ourselves are reflected in the universe. Again, a lot of stuff that sounds New Age, but it's not New Age. It's biblical. God, nature is not our mother, Brian. Nature is our fallen older sister. Right? Chesterton talks about that. And the same God who created nature created us. So, of course, there's going to be connections. Right? That's the whole point of what they call holistic medicine. Right? There's a connection between different parts of us. To listen to the Chinese who say we have this thing called qi, this energy running through our body. There's nothing unbiblical about that. We're fearfully and wonderfully made, okay? In a meaningful world, there's a connection there. And so one of the things we said at the end of our last podcast is that true virtue is not just do's and don'ts. Virtue is bringing yourself into a proper alignment with reality, the reality that God created. And so, again, if you want to experience that, read the Chronicles of Narnia. So Lewis gives us apologetics in Mere Christianity, the problem with pain and miracles. But then he takes the apologetics and incarnates it or embodies it in his 7 Chronicles of Narnia, in his Space Trilogy, also known as the Ransom Trilogy. All of these things come together in Lewis, and they come together more subtly, but they come together in the Lord of the Rings as well. Because the Lord of the Rings is a Christian worldview. It's very deep and subliminal, but it's a Christian worldview with a proper understanding of virtue and vice. So let's dig into these guys, because they help us to understand why the imagination is essential to the Christian life and will strengthen us. Let me start with a story before we dive in. Okay, many years ago, my parents lived in Florida, and many years ago there was a evangelist in Florida. He's now deceased, older man, who was telling people not to read C.S. Lewis. So I happened to be there visiting my parents, so I sat down and talked with him. Now, as I expected, he had never actually read anything by Lewis. He'd read something online that said Lewis was a heretic. Boom. That doesn't faze me.
He was really a pagan.
Yeah. This is what fazed me. At one point, I said to him, well, sir, what have you read by Lewis? Have you read the Chronicles of Narnia? And he said, and this was a strong believer, led many people to the Lord. I don't want to make fun of him. But he said, ever since I became a believer 40 years ago, I have not read a single work of fiction. He didn't even read the Left Behind series, which is probably a good thing. But anyway, okay. Now, it took me a while to figure this out. If you asked that man, why don't you read fiction? He would have said, because I'm a Christian. But I believe the real reason he doesn't read fiction, the reason he doesn't know himself, is that he's a modernist and doesn't know it. Mm-hmm. He's accepted the phony Enlightenment split that says fact and fiction are completely separate. That again, Jesus' parables are fictional short stories invented to teach us a lesson. So fiction is not evil, okay? Mm-hmm. Everything has its place in the order of God. So we want to be careful, because I think a lot of us still have that idea that fiction means a lie, mm-hmm. right? Tolkien wrote a poem called Mythopoeia, and he talked about how C.S. Lewis, when he was an atheist, said, well, myths are lies breathed through silver. But he still thought they were lies until, as we talked about last time, Tolkien explained to him that the reason Christ sounds like a myth is because he's the myth that came true, the myth that became fact. We were all created in the image of God, the Imago Dei, and God has written eternity upon the hearts of men. And although we are fallen, total depravity, we still retain the image of God. And we retain the desire that God has put us in that drives us towards him. And no better explicator of Christian desire than C.S. Lewis.
Well, you've kind of gestured towards what my kind of first question before we jump in, because I kind of want to frame it to highlight the importance, right? And my question is, and I'm going to take a stab at it because this is something I've wrestled with, and I'm looking forward to kind of wrestling with it more with you. But I think it's become very important to me, right? So the question is going to be, how has modernism and postmodernism really affected us? In other words, it's become kind of an air we breathe. We don't recognize the way that it's indoctrinated.
The fish doesn't know the water's wet.
Yeah, and your story right there was a great example. We're saying, I don't read this because I'm Christian, and you're saying, no, you don't read that because you're a modernist.
Right.
And you don't know that you're a modernist, but that's what you are because that's the air you breathe. But one thing that I've noticed is when I've read a lot of modern books, read a lot of like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Chesterton, George MacDonald, and when I read those guys, particularly Lewis and Tolkien might be the strongest. It's like they're seeing the world completely differently, and they're able to go layers deeper than most of the modern books that I read. And I've often said for Lewis, this isn't a formal term, but it's almost like he's got a cosmic theology. Right. And that it's so grandiose, and it encompasses so many things, and he sees the light in so many nooks and crannies in areas that it becomes just exceedingly beautiful, but it really opens your mind to the holistic nature, the all-encompassingness of Christianity and how it applies to life. And so it almost seems like they were able to access something, perhaps, modernism was already creeping in to some degree, but they seemed immune from it, maybe because of their classical education or whatever, to where we've kind of lost that. So I just... That's what's impacted me, but I'm interested to hear you just kind of diagnose, like, what are we not aware of that has indoctrinated and formed us in an unhealthy way that undermines the Christian vision that we're supposed to have?
A good example, just so we can all see it. If you ask an evangelical, why did God forbid pork in the kosher laws? Most of them will say, well, we now know that pork carries a lot of diseases, and so God did it for health. Now, the Bible says nothing about that. It's got something to do with holiness, whatever that is, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe that's true. But the fact that we immediately go there
to science
is this sign of everything. God would not have a restriction unless he had a good, logical, scientific health reason for doing it.
I've heard that for circumcision too. That's because of health reasons.
That's right.
Which was actually based off of kind of a study that was really phony back.
And actually, when I was growing up, a lot of Gentile kids were circumcised because it was cleaner. Yeah. And again, why do we do this? I'm not saying that that's an impossible reading, but it's a little more eisegesis than it is exegesis, because we are taking our near worship of health and putting it back into the Bible. Remember, some of the holiest people in the history of the church were filthy. Okay, I mean, they didn't do any hygiene. Okay, so the idea that cleanliness is next to godliness is not Christian. I mean, it's good. I'm glad Americans are cleaner than French people. But we're making fun of the French today. This is good. But that's not Christian. Okay, it's one of our idols. It's kind of weird. In fact, somebody once said to me, I can't remember where I read it, that in the same way that the medievals could be a little bit overly superstitious and looking for demonic influence everywhere, we're exactly the same with our hygiene rituals. It's like the germs are always out to get us, and we're doing our own rituals the way they did. So it's kind of a funny thing. You know? We talked about Charles Taylor before, A Secular Age, and he said that before the modern period, and the modern period really is the Enlightenment, not the Renaissance. The Renaissance is still of a piece with the Middle Ages in many ways, in its overall cosmic vision. He said that people used to live in a porous universe where there's a coming and going, a Jacob's ladder trafficking between the visible and the invisible. But since the Enlightenment, we live in what he calls a buffered universe where we're safe from all that. Okay, so that's why we turn to germs instead, right? Maybe we realize that there's an invisible warfare, but we're not allowed to believe that. How many Christians have you met that believe literally every single miracle in the Bible, but when a miracle happens today, they're like, oh, well,
yeah.
Why? What a crazy cessationism. I mean, what's that all about? I mean, no, it still happens. Miracles still happen, okay? It's still the same God, right? And so, but again, Lewis and Tolkien, okay, look, who are maybe the greatest American apologists? Maybe Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel, maybe William Lane Craig. All excellent, but all extremely right-brained. Understand? Very, very, it's good stuff, okay? But there's less of, Peter Kraft would be a good example of somebody writing more in the Lewis, and I can try to be that myself, where they're trying to bring in the imagination level as well as the logic and the reason to appeal to the full person. So here's a good way to put it. Okay. Do you have a Renaissance festival up here? You know what those are?
We
you dress
do,
up?
yeah.
Okay.
We actually have a pretty big one.
Oh, you have a big one too? Okay. We have a huge one in near Houston. And I went every year with my kids. And then after 5 or 6 years, I suddenly noticed something I hadn't noticed before. I looked around at the other people there, and I realized 70%, 80% of the people at this fair, we would disagree about everything, from God to sexuality to marriage to everything, right? They're mostly really crazy secular liberal people that go to those things, those LARPers, right? And yet they're there. And I believe that they don't know it, but they're hungry for the beauty and, yes, the hierarchy. Look, one of the things that you know when you go to a Renaissance festival, you can tell the boys from the girls.
Yep.
You may want to cover your son's eyes, but you can tell them. So I think they're hungry for that kind of meaningful hierarchy, even though on their own level they disagree with everything the Middle Ages stands for, and yet they're there. Both Narnia and Middle-earth are medieval places with meaningful hierarchy, with kings and all of that stuff. I think people are hungry for it. Lewis said, when you get rid of kings, people do not stop looking for role models. They just go to rock stars and footballers, by which he means soccer players. So, we're hungry. That's why we, take a family like the Kennedys and go crazy, because we don't have a aristocracy, so we have to make up one or something. There is something inside of us that looks for that beauty and meaningfulness, and I think that's why people are attracted to Narnia and Middle-earth. Even people that would completely disagree with the worldview of Lewis and Tolkien, they're attracted there because there's a kind of meaningful connection, a knowledge of who you are and your place in this society that I think is very appealing to a world that's become flat. Lowest common denominator world. Flat. Okay? There's nothing good. Egalitarianism and equity just lead to an ugly, sexless, colorless, classless world. And we say we want that, but that's not the world we want. We don't want a dull world.
Yeah.
Hey, let's say something good about the French. Vive la différence. That's the best thing the French say, right? Long live difference. It's good. God, look at the God that we serve. How many varieties of beetles did God create? He loves diversity, right? He loves all of that sort of stuff. He creates it. And so Lewis and Tolkien sort of baptize our imagination that we can look to nature and see the presence of God, see the presence of meaning and purpose and order and harmony. and we can take joy in it. It's not just a dead world. One of my books I wrote, my subtitle was The Modern World Has Killed the Heavens and the Church Has Performed the Funeral. Because we too get nervous. We think it's, quote, New Age stuff. Well, there would have been no need for the New Age movement if the church had not lost its sense of wonder and mystery and miracle and magic. But let's look at the magic we learn from Lord of the Rings, right? There's two kinds of magic. There is what I like to call sympathetic magic, and there's also sort of technological magic. The bad kind of magic is performed by Sauron and Saruman. It is a magic that dominates and that destroys. Remember what Treebeard says about Sauron, about Saruman? He has a mind of metal and wheels. He does not care for things that grow. Right? Remember that, right? So there's an evil, but the good kind, and I believe a Christian can accept this concept of black magic versus white magic. And I see it in Lewis, too. I talk about it in The Myth Made Fact, that black magic is about power and domination, right? White magic is about finding and restoring connection. So remember that Galadriel and the elves give the fellowship these invisibility cloaks, but they are not like Harry Potter invisible. They're not technological magic. The way they work is that the elven spinsters, right, they wove into the fabric the lore of wood and stone and tree. So what they really are chameleon cloaks that meld in with nature because they are in sympathy with all aspects. And they did that well in the movie when Frodo and Sam are on that rocky ledge and they cover it over and they look like rocks because they're blending in. It's not, again, like magic in the, magician sense. It is a deeper kind of magic that runs it. Or like the lembas bread, that the less you eat of other food, the more lembas sustains you. That's the sort of stuff that when you rely only on it, it strengthens you even more. That's magic, right? It's wonderful. The way that the Ents destroy Isengard, right? You may not know as much here, but certainly in Houston, where all we have is a flat foundation, some cement slab. If you've got a big tree that's roots go under your house, sooner or later it's going to turn your foundation to crumbs. But it takes a long, long time. But the way it's described in Lord of the Rings is the Ents grab on and like what nature does in 100 years, it does in 1 minute, right? But it's still natural, right? It's still natural. It's an organic kind of magic that I think people are hungry for.
And they release the river.
Yeah,
they
good point. Yeah,
the dam and
bring it back to the way it was, right? It's now, or if you know Prince Caspian, it's now the fords of Baruna again, not Baruna Bridge anymore. We've set free the fords.
Yeah,
the bridge which is chaining it has been set free.
So I want to kind of take this approach, because I thought, we can explain or we can just give examples, and there's so many examples, right? So you could just like you gave, like there's thematic examples, there's character examples. And then there's book examples where we could dive into like a concept of a book. So let's just kind of ride with that for a while. Okay. So you gave one. If you just want to introduce, what do you think? Do you want to go with some themes? Do you want to go with some characters? Do you want to introduce a book?
Okay, we can summarize all of this with what may be the single best line in all of Lewis, and that's a lot to say. Comes in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Chronicles of Narnia. And the children meet Ramandu.
I know this.
Ramandu, you know it, right? Ramandu is a magician. But he's also a star. And in Narnia, the stars are people, so to speak. And when they get old, they come down to Narnia to retire, right? And youthen themselves. Well, when the children, they're shocked. And one of the children is Eustace Clarence Scrubb. And he almost deserved it. Yeah. He got it, right? And he, grew up with no imagination whatsoever, right? And even though he's been saved now,
he's the modern boy.
He's the modern boy. And
progressive
it's still in them.
Parents.
Exactly. In fact, that really shocks Christians when they read it because it says that his family were teetotalers, right? Yeah. And non-smokers, and they always kept the windows open. And people are like, well, what's wrong with that? Okay, well, you need to understand that in the 20th century, there were a group of people that did not smoke and did not drink and were extremely clean living. They were called the SS. Hitler was very much into health. One of the good ideas Hitler had was that pregnant women should not smoke or drink. And he was but they also killed people, you see?
Yeah.
So back then, it was almost your duty to smoke and drink, because if you didn't, you were what they called you a crank back then. So it's kind of funny to read it now. We would just say they were progressives today. But Okay, so Eustace Clarence Scrubb, which has grown up with this progressive idea, when he realizes that Ramandu is a star, he says, "Oh, sir, oh my. In my world, a star is just a flaming ball of gas." And Ramandu says, and this is the whole core, "No, my son, even in your world, that's not what a star is. That's
what it's made of."
Yeah, what it's made of. There is a difference. Look, I am made up of so much flesh and bone and sinew and internal organs, all that sort of stuff. But I hope what I am made of is not the equivalent of who I am. I hope that but we do this. We give, look, what have we discovered? Like 80 or 90% of the world is dark matter and dark energy. We don't even know what it is, but we've got a name for it, so we think we understand it, right? Or those psychiatrists who come up with a name like manic depressive and they think they understand the brain, which they don't at all. They don't even understand how the drugs work or why they stop working. But there's a sort of arrogance that thinks, if I know what it's made of, I know what it is. And those are not always the same thing. And that's what Lewis, when you talked earlier about opening our eyes to see what things truly are, what is the true nature of goodness, truth, and beauty, is so important. And so that one phrase, I just think sums up so much of Lewis and Tolkien and what their appeal is and what their common sense appeal is.
Yeah, two thoughts. One, that's really changed the way I'll sit on my back porch and I watch the birds and the trees, right? And particularly the trees. You mentioned that, Tolkien would walk with Lewis, and Tolkien took forever because he wanted to look at the trees. And it's really it's not dead wood, right? But it's something that's living. It's made. What is it made of? Well, whatever wood is, right? I don't know what the technical term is, but that's what it's made of. But what is it? It's something much more, right? And that opens your kind of contemplation and imagination.
We call that Aristotle's four causes. So
what's that?
The four causes, the material cause. You've got these different ways. What is the cause of something? So what is the cause of Michelangelo's David? Well, the material cause is the piece of marble out of which it was made. The efficient cause is Michelangelo, the artist, the cause and effect. But you've got the formal cause, which is the form of the human body, right? And then you've got the final cause, which is to glorify God and man. In our day and age, we want to limit everything to just the material and efficient cause. We want to cut off an example that's often used by people is, so you're in a room and the teapot gives off that whistle. And you ask me, why is that teapot whistling? Well, one answer to that is because the air has reached a certain velocity and it's moving. I'm not a scientist, and it's causing that sound. But there's another answer to why is that teapot whistling, and that is because I want a cup of tea. Do you see we've suddenly moved into a human final cause of what the real cause is? And again, we think if we can find the simple cause and effect, we understand it, but we don't. Okay, just because we understand that we have to work back till we get to the ultimate cause that started it all, but nobody wants to go there.
Yeah,
the atheists don't want to go there,
and kids will call you out on it.
Yeah,
I love when kids ask questions. Yeah,
why?
Yeah, and you're like, you could try to give them a scientific answer.
Yeah,
like, well, the food goes in your belly, and but I found it's much better to give some kind of grandiose myths, right?
Yeah,
and it's like
story.
The food's going in, and it's going to explode in your belly, and it's going to go to all parts, and it's going to make your muscles stronger. And it's mythically true that that's how it works. But your kid's not interested in the what is it made of? It wants to know what is it? What is taking place? And you have to explain it in story.
Look, if you don't know what a thing truly is and what it's made for, okay? You know what a Stradivarius is? Super expensive violins, most perfect violins ever made, a Stradivarius. Let's say I had one, but I didn't know what it was for. And there was a nail that was sticking out, and so I used it to bang the nail in. I would destroy it. I would destroy this perfect music-making machine. What are we for, right? What are our bodies for, right? Screwtape says, the humans think they own their bodies. That's why we do all these things. We think abortion, everything's okay because we own our body. What do you mean we own our body? Right? It's a gift. Everything comes to us as a gift. So it is a matter of looking deeper and under. That's why people are slowly starting to admit this. Why did science, as we know it, arise in the West, but did not arise in China or India? The Chinese invented many things long before we did in the West, but they did not invent science and the scientific method as we know it. The reason we invented it was because all of the early scientists were Christians, or at least strong theists. They believed that God created the world, that there was design in the world. And because they believed in God, they believed that the design was there and that we could trust our senses to discern it because God put it there, right? Newton did not invent the laws of gravitation. He discovered the laws of gravity. They were already there. Einstein did not invent E equals mc squared. He discerned it. In fact, I believe it kind of came to him almost like a vision, and he spent the rest of his life trying to prove it scientifically. But that, again, one of the criteria that a law of physics, a principle is true, is elegance. The more beautiful and elegant it is, the more likely it is to be true. That wouldn't be the case in a random, haphazard universe, only in a designed universe. I'm a big advocate of what they call intelligent design. Let's just look at the facts and see what it points to, right? And by the way, Richard Dawkins is an intelligent design theorist. You didn't know that? Did you ever see the documentary Expelled by Ben Stein?
I did, yes. That was
really good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you might remember there's one point where we're getting to the end and he's interviewing Dawkins. And he's like, well, then how do you account for the unbelievable complexity, the hardwired information that is coded into the DNA? How can you possibly account for that through random time and chance? And Dawkins said, well, it could have happened this way. Aliens could have seeded our DNA. Well, that's basically an admission of intelligent design, that you look at it, it could not have evolved, it had to be designed. Then he goes on and says, of course, those aliens would have been evolved by some kind of Darwinian method. And by the way, he got that idea from, remember Watson and Crick? Watson wrote a book called Life as It Is, where he suggested panspermia. So the guy who discovered DNA, who was an atheist, he realized that the complexity of it could not possibly have evolved by time and chance. So, but somehow it's okay to mention aliens, okay, or the ridiculousness of the multiverse, which has destroyed Marvel. Everything is meaningless when you have a multiverse because you can change everything you do. It's all meaningless.
It's no longer a good story.
Yeah, it's no more story.
Rules that you can follow.
That's right. Yeah, you've broken the rules. So I'm just tired of it. But anyway, although Loki season 2 had a good ending.
Okay.
If you watch Loki.
I never got into Marvel for those reasons. I felt like they would create this impossible, this plot that was impossible to get out of, and then they would introduce some new rules.
Yes, I know.
And then it was like, well, okay,
I
can write that.
You just jump in and just
turns out I can fly. Who knows? I got away from everyone.
Yeah, what happened? It does even Princess Leia starts to fly, and was it number 8 or something? She propels herself by the Force. I didn't know she could do that.
Yeah,
did you make that up? Or the two youngins could talk to each other because they were connected. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
They call that a deus ex machina. It goes back to Aristotle that talks about that's not how you should solve a plot. And it was like suddenly everything's messed up, and this big crane comes down with a god in it and settles everything. Now, Christianity is partly deus ex machina. That's the book of Job. And then God spoke to him from the whirlwind, okay, because we're ultimately inadequate down here. But good storytelling tries not to overdo that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You want a plot that will resolve itself. And you see that, great plots.
So can you comment on, because I think this ties into here, and I do want to hear your thoughts on this. So can you comment on, the three transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, especially as a Christian audience, truth we understand the most, goodness probably the second most, and then the beauty we understand the least, particularly the fact that there is an objective beauty.
A lot of people got mad at me because I published a book called Restoring Beauty, the Good, the True, and the Beautiful in the Writings of C.S. Lewis. The title was supposed to be Rehabilitating Beauty, but the editor said, no, people will think it's a 7-step program. So, all right, whatever. So we got Restore, which is good. Okay. And I started by attacking the movie Shrek, where at the end of the movie Shrek, the princess gets ugly. And we're supposed to think, what a great message for the children to tell the girls that beauty isn't important. No, beauty is important.
And as a child, I remember watching that, and I hated it.
Good. My kids did too. I was glad. So the kids know better. That's not the way it's... See, the whole point about fairy tale, we love to go to fairy because things are simpler there. The outside and the inside are more inclusive. So by looking at someone, you can tell if they're good or bad. You can tell the orcs are evil by looking at them. Now, it's a little more complicated because the evil witch in Snow White is beautiful, but she's beautiful in a cold, vain, self-centered way, whereas Snow White, not Snow Brown in the new movie, but the real Snow White is actually, Rachel Ziegler is far uglier.
There's our first YouTube strike.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, if you watch the movie, it's not quite as well. It's not a good movie, but it's not quite as bad as you think if you watch it. But still, it's still bad. But anyway, so Cinderella, or rather Snow White and Cinderella too, their beauty is a beauty. It's a humility. They don't even know they're beautiful, right? So it's not simplistic, but we know the dragon's bad by looking at it. We want that kind of, and the child needs that simplicity as they're slowly making their way in the world, and then they start understanding how it gets more complex as they move through. But fairy has a clarity to it that is very, very attractive. And so beauty is important, okay? We've just been full. Now, for a while, I could see how mad, the students were mad when I was talking about beauty, because a lot of them have been fooled by Madison Avenue to thinking beauty is like the model on the runway who looks more like a leopard than a woman. That's I don't know what you call that. I call that ugliness, not beauty. But anyway, so in other words, they're against beauty because they've been given a phony version of beauty from Hollywood and whatnot. Of course, they're not against it, right? They want a true beauty. And again, just if you want to see true inner beauty, just look at the homeschool girls, okay? They all just have long, dark, hair. They're not all fancy stuff, but there's an inner beauty. Most of them don't even wear much makeup, but there's still an inner beauty that comes from their joy, their gratitude, their wonder. Look at. Okay, I'm gonna talk to all your female listeners here. Okay, how does a woman stay young and pretty? Okay, you can be like the Hollywood people and cut your face up. Okay, I will tell you how you can remain looking young and beautiful and sweet forever. It is by getting married, having 4 children at least, and homeschooling them. I teach homeschoolers all the time, and I look at the pictures, and I can't tell if that's the wife or the older sister in the family. And I think it's because they're living a life with, a housewife life is stressful, but it's different than the stress of the business world, where it's a stress where nobody cares about you. You're just a number, right? They work hard, but it's a meaningful kind of way. And I'm telling you, I all over the country, I'm amazed at how lovely these homeschool mothers are. They're like 50 or 60, and I think they're 35. It's amazing. And you don't have to cut up your face, okay? You need to approach life with a sense of wonder and purpose and meaning and working with the children. And it's just wonderful to see that joy. So we're missing out on this sort of thing. It's just crazy, I don't know, but again, we are so embarrassed by beauty. For instance, people get all bent out of shape, like when Donald Trump says, "That's a beautiful woman." That's just a compliment, okay? And it's not exactly sexist because he says exactly the same thing when he sees a handsome guy.
Yeah.
Right? He has an appreciation for physical beauty. We should. And look, I remember when I was in school, they got rid. Now, I'm not some big defender of beauty pageants. Most of them are just nasty, okay? But there's such a thing as a tasteful beauty pageant. People are like, well, you can't have a beauty pageant. It discriminates against girls who are less pretty. And I'm like, okay, then you better get rid of your entire football program because that discriminates against boys that are less athletic. We have got to appreciate beauty in all its forms. If it's a physical kind of beauty, the strength of a weightlifter or something like that, or a gymnast or something like that, and we because we don't like difference. Look.
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. So there's a great one. John, I forget, this was maybe 15, 20 years ago, and John Madden is announcing.
Okay.
It's John Madden. And there's
football
this
guy.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And there's the camera's kind of scrolling the sideline, and there's this big lineman, right?
Yeah.
And he's got his shirt is like torn and
Right.
blood dripping down, and he's kind of like dirty and just gritty. And he goes, oh, and Madden just stops and goes, oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, there we go. See,
and it's like, but he recognized, like,
yes.
He's exemplifying the
Right.
beauty of a fit, self-disciplined football player, right? He's exemplifying what that is. There's a telos there, right? And you can't help but recognize that.
And we should, and it's right to do, and it does not discriminate against other people. They've got beauty in some other form, okay? We're the body of Christ. Somebody's got to be the butt, man, in the body of Christ, okay? Not everybody can be the eyes, all right? So, but we all have, I remember telling my black sheep uncle, hey, Sam, nobody's a waste. You can at least be a bad example. You're like, I'm the bad example. But but we've got to get over We just want this flat equality. Look, I mean, can you all of this crazy DEI? Can you would you buy? I'm sure you have a Minneapolis Symphony.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Would you buy season tickets to the Minneapolis Symphony if they chose their musicians on egalitarian principles? Don't think I would. Okay. Nobody would get a sports thing if they, well, that's not true. I'm from Houston. We have the Texans. I think they'll take anybody. But you see, I mean, like, I don't understand why we can't understand this. We just get so crazy about it because of this superficiality. But we need to respect beauty. And, there's that famous phrase, classical people, we love to quote a phrase from Dostoevsky, beauty will save the world. Because beauty, truth, and goodness are all a kind of harmony or balance, a kind of health in the world. And we have got to not pull away for it, or we will create an ugly world. As the communists did with their brutalist style, that crazy movie called The Brutalist. It's shut it off after the first half. And even that, just don't watch it. But anyway, the brutalist style was ugly.
Bennett
right?
hates the brutalist
Oh,
style.
you know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Remember your comment about that in St. Louis?
Yeah, it's all monolithic, cement and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, they call it the brutalist style.
Architecture.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's lost any kind of beauty. And I tell you, people react differently. Send an American to Oxford, just walking around, you feel different about it.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Houston, but my son lives in San Antonio. My favorite place in the world is the San Antonio Riverwalk. Because now in America, every place looks the same as every other place. That doesn't mean it's messy. The strip malls are nicely done, but they look the same. And I do a lot of driving around the country. All looks the same. But you go to San Antonio and you go on the Riverwalk, every bend is different. Every staircase looks different. Every window looks. I mean, it's human. It's like a Gothic cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is human. There's a master craftsman, but the individual beauty and idiosyncrasies come through as well. You also see that if you go to New Orleans, the French Quarter, as long as you don't get robbed. If you go to Savannah, if you go to San Francisco, there's still some cities.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah, where everything's
on the
unique.
New England coast. Yeah.
Hey, you go to San Francisco, going every doorknob looks different. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's not the same thing. Cookie cutter, on and on and on. Suburbia, right, where a lot of us grew up.
But with the objective beauty, it's tapping into that objectivity in a certain way.
Which is why objective beauty.
Two women that look very differently
right.
can both be tapping into that objective beauty, which is different than saying diversity for diversity's sake.
Yeah.
Or trying to be unique and different for the sake of being unique and different, to where you turn your hair blue, or you pierce up your body so that it no longer has that unity and that form that you're talking about.
I call it the cult of the ugly. We seek after now. Let's be careful, okay? I grew up in the 70s, and like I said, we wore those horrible brown suits with the big collars and that polyester, and we looked like idiots, but we thought we looked good. We were trying to look beautiful. We were not trying to look ugly. I don't know. Maybe the girls think they look beautiful with the nose stuff in their hair. Maybe they do, but I don't think so. There's got to be a sickness. I call it a return of Gnosticism, sort of a hatred of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you pierce it and cut it up, right? I mean, and, we still will send a girl to a therapist if she cuts herself, but not if she pierces herself all over the place. Is there any difference? Okay, I mean, it's sort of crazy the way we do these things, right? I don't want to go there, but we need to restore a sense of goodness, truth, and beauty. For God made, that word tov, right? And God said it is good in Genesis 1. That word tov was translated in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. They chose the word kalos or kalon. K-A-L-O, and that means both good and beautiful. And I'm guessing it's probably there in Tov too, because those Septuagint guys were Greek scholars. We just take for granted we understand Hebrew better than the scholars of Alexandria. Maybe not, okay, right? Just because we've been laying down, they probably knew it better than we did. Not to mention the translators of the King James were also the best scholars of their day, right? I mean, the only difference is that we probably have slightly better, more accurate manuscripts than they did. But other than that, their translation is very, very accurate.
So where do you see this playing out within Tolkien and Lewis? In what ways do they kind of portray this?
Again, a lot of people, when they read the book, Lord of the Rings, or see the movie, they're like, why do we spend so long in the Shire? It's such a slow beginning. Now, part of it is because Tolkien really doesn't know what he's doing in the beginning. But the other thing is, before we have to fall in love with the Shire. Because what are we fighting for? One of the most controversial lines in all of Lewis comes in a line, The Witch in the Wardrobe, when Father Christmas comes back, and Father Christmas gives a sword, right? And then he gives a bow and arrow to Susan, but, only use it in extreme need. I do not expect you to be in the fighting. Then he gives Lucy a dagger. Says, again, I do not intend you to be in the fighting. She said, well, sir, I think I'm brave enough. And Father Christmas says, that's not the point. Battles are ugly when women fight. I can't tell you how that makes modern Christians go out of their mind. Do you know that the Focus on the Family radio play version, which is so accurate, left that line out?
Really?
What? And they did that 20 years ago. What? And the new movie, it's unbelievable. They kept the line, but Father Christmas says, battles are ugly things. Now, that's not what Lewis said. Lewis didn't think battles were ugly things, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, why are battles ugly when women fight? We're so insane in our egalitarianism, we can't even listen to it. It's true, because the whole reason the men fight the battle is to preserve their home and their family and their wife and the beauty of their family. Mm-hmm. If the women are fighting as well, then what the heck are you fighting for? Mm-hmm. Right? That's why battles are ugly when women. That's why Chesterton, in a book he wrote called What's Wrong with the World, he says that he's actually against the woman's vote.
Women's suffrage, yeah.
Now, not because he thinks women are less intelligent. He had a very high view of his wife, because he thinks that when women vote, it's like they're joining the mob. Okay? Mm-hmm. We need something that is separate from the dirt of politics, right? I love what he said. This is 100 years ago, the definition of a feminist. Feminist is a person who dislikes the chief feminine characteristics. He said that 100 years ago, right? So, again, it's all because of this radical inclusivism. We think that everything should be the same. No, that's not beauty. Mm-hmm. That's not goodness, and it's not truth. Right? There is hierarchy. There are differences, but it's a meaningful difference.
You make me think of it's one of my favorite lines in the Lord of the Rings. Let's see if I can quote it correctly. And it's Faramir, right? And I think it's the chapter Window into the West.
Oh, he's talking to Eowyn, probably.
No, he's talking. Well, that's a beautiful place too. Faramir's character might be one of my favorites, but Faramir is talking
they didn't quite catch in the movie properly.
Yes, yeah. So Frodo is talking with him, right, and Sam's there watching, and you can see like Tolkien's comparing and contrasting Faramir and Boromir.
Right,
kind of two different types of masculinity and patriotism and whatnot. And Faramir says, I don't love the arrow for its swiftness, the sword for its sharpness, or the shield for its strength.
Right.
But I love that which it defends.
The city of men. Which is not in the movie, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most important lines. It gets to the core. Yeah, that is wonderful. That he is the true dreamer. And by the way, in some of his letters, Tolkien said he identified even more with Faramir than with Gandalf. We all take for granted Tolkien is Gandalf, the professor, but he identified the most with Faramir.
And he connects Faramir to Gandalf at the end.
That's true.
Sam says, he's like, I don't.
Yes.
I forget. He says, I don't see you like so and so. I think you're cut of the same cloth of Gandalf. And then Faramir says, perhaps what you're seeing is Numenor shining through me.
That's right. And remember, what one of the reasons the father doesn't like Faramir, he calls him a wizard's pupil.
Yes.
You've turned against me. You've gone to that way. But no, he is the true Numenorian. And by the way, Tolkien got something right as well. He says both in the fall of Numenor and the slow fall of Gondor is because they became obsessed with living forever. Mm-hmm. And we ended up with old men, old dying men, old dying childless men. So they want to live forever, but they're not having children. That seems to be it's exactly what we're seeing today, right? They're not having kids. That is the future. That is the way we keep going, right? But they're not, and then they're trying to extend their life. Just crazy. And, he saw that coming, and it is coming right now.
So it becomes a selfishness where your life is about yourself versus about preserving that which passes through you. Right? Yeah, that which you've inherited and that which you want to see last.
Did you watch Downton Abbey?
No.
There's an early season, the first season or so, when he's trying to explain to the guy who's going to succeed it, I am a steward of this place. I don't so much own it as I am a steward. I need to keep this and continue it down. That's again what we've forgotten about tradition. Mm-hmm. And people loved Downton Abbey, right? It had a kind of clarity, but also of joy and a deep sense of patriotism, a good sense of being tied to the soil. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what true conservatism is about. It's kind of agrarianism. Mm-hmm. Wendell Berry is, in a sense, a little bit of the American Tolkien or Lewis, in the way that he wants small is beautiful. It's what the Catholics call subsidiarity. Catholic social justice is you do things on the smallest level possible. Mm-hmm. That's why a true conservative should always be in favor of states' rights and local rights. Now, unfortunately, in the past, states' rights was often used as a cover for Jim Crow laws. But that's not what we're talking. We're talking about the 10th Amendment, right? If you don't give the power to the federal government, it should go to the state or the individual. But a lot of conservatives are embarrassed to speak up because of that old. They should just say, look, it was misused. Mm-hmm. Now we're trying to get back to what the founders meant. Okay? Smaller is better. The federal government has no business talking about education. That should be a state issue, if not a local issue. Right? Mm-hmm. So Again, we that's the hobbits, okay? That's the way the hobbits are living.
And can you speak to the harrowing of the Shire at the end?
Scouring of the Shire.
The scouring,
yeah. Now, that's left out of the movie, but it's so anticlimactic. People already complained about how many endings the Return of the King has. But if you get the brilliant 13-part BBC radio play version, which is excellent, it does do the whole scouring of the Shire. And we have to watch out, right? We think we won the war, but it's creeped into us, right? Watch out. There's a famous poem by William Butler Yeats, the famous Irish poet about 100 years ago, called September 1913, where he is raging against the Irish middle class who are just acting just like the English. They're being like Scrooge. It's like, why did we win this battle for you to be just like them at the same time? What's going on, man? I'll never forget one of the most galvanizing moments for me was in The Closing of the American Mind by Harold Bloom. And he said, picture a young teenager with his Walkman phones. That was the old, with his ear pods now today, right? And listening to some, horrible heavy metal music. And it's right. And, here he is. He is the heir of all of this sacrifice, all of the brilliance of the founding fathers of 2 world wars, all of this, right? And he's the heir. And what does it lead up to? Some, prepubescent boy gyrating to songs about masturbation, is what he says, right? He wants to be like the drag queen that sings the song. What are we doing? Okay, we've lost the whole thing. Is this how it ends? Oh my gosh, it's one of the T.S. Eliot poems. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper, right? What are we going to do? So we need to recover and have a sense of gratitude and an understanding of the tradition that it's up to us to carry down, right? I knew things were going bad when you talked to, don't compare me to nobody else. Or what was it, Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model? That was a very terrible moment in our country, right? Yes, you are a role model, right? If these boys are looking up to you, you're a role model. And we model ourselves and other people as we grow. And again, the radical, Lewis once said, there's nothing really original in my work. Everything I wrote about can be traced back to Plato or Aristotle or Boethius
or Dante.
Yeah. But nobody said it as well as Lewis, right? That's our job, to carry on and then add something of ourself to it.
To stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's why my book is called On the Shoulders of Hobbits, a little play on the shoulders of giants that we're doing. And it's all part of classical education, which is inviting your students into the great conversation that has been going on since Moses wrote the 5 books and Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then everything right to it. You're part of that dialogue or that discussion, and there is great beauty in there. Now, beauty doesn't mean the great Tchaikovsky. He'll often use what's called a discordant note or an atonal moment, but the atonal actually increases the beauty. Back when my grandmother's day and my mother's day, a woman would wear a beauty mark, which is like a mole. That is ugly. But somehow the mole increased the beauty of the entire face. So there's an understanding of that in art. There can be an ugliness, but it's leading to remember that moment? Oh my gosh, in the Passion of the Christ, when Jesus is being led to the cross and his mother comes up to him and he's completely beaten to a pulp, right? And he says, "Behold, mother, I am making all things new," which just blew my mind when I listened to that, right? At this moment of, in a sense, incredible ugliness, it is the prelude to a greater beauty, which is wonderful. And we only see the resurrection for 1 second, but you see him. And of course, the movie's coming. Mel Gibson says, we're waiting for it. I've been waiting a long time. What is it, 15 years? What has it been? It's been a long time.
He's been building up for it, man. He's got to do some more fasting, and he's going to be good to go. Can you speak to, well, where do I go to? Let's highlight Bilbo. Okay. Or no, sorry, not Bilbo.
Frodo.
Sam.
Or Sam. Okay.
Sam or Frodo and Sam. You can kind of do that together. Maybe talk about their friendship.
Oh, yes.
I think that's a beautiful
look. I am so grateful that the Lord of the Rings films were made in Australia and New Zealand back then, not today, but made back then. Because if the Lord of the Rings had been made in America, there is no way they would have allowed Frodo and Sam to be so close, because people would say they're gay. And there are still some Americans who think that. They're not, okay? It's close male friend. Now, again, the Australia and New Zealand, they're going bad now too, but they used to not be afraid of close male friendship, as nobody was in the past, right? So it's a beautiful thing. And their friendship. And here's another beautiful thing. I'm so glad they kept to it. Okay, Sam and Frodo are friends, but Frodo is still Master Frodo. He never just calls him Frodo. You notice that? He's Master Frodo. Again, we can't understand hierarchy, and we get all bent out of shape, right? We kind of forget that almost everybody had domestic help before about 50 years ago, okay? And sometimes they were almost part of the family, right? I'm not talking about slavery. I'm talking about free domestic help. So, again, there's a beauty to their friendship and the hope that comes out, and then the friendship of the four of them, and then the friendship of the whole fellowship. And you remember when Gandalf, Elrond is like, do we really want to bring Merry and Pippin? Hey, I think it's best to trust to their friendship more than anything else. They will stick together like that. So there is, again, there's a simplicity. I mean, Frodo is not just the unlikely hero, he is the unwilling hero. He doesn't want this job. He's the philosopher king, maybe. But he's got to do it. And he's doing it not for some crazy abstract reason. He's doing it to save the Shire. That's why he's doing it, okay? And that's what it should be. We're fighting to save our home. Most of the Southerners fighting in the Civil War were not fighting for slavery. They were fighting for their home, and most of them didn't have slaves. The great majority didn't. They were fighting for their home and their way of life, right? And it's a shame that slavery got mixed up with that. But they were fighting for that as well. There is a good kind of patriotism, right? That means the love of the fatherland is what it means literally.
Yeah,
and that's a good thing.
I always love the moment when they're in Mordor, and Frodo finally. Well, there's kind of 2 points. One, Sam's still kind of holding on hope for a return journey, and Frodo gives that up. But he finally gives it up when he drops his armor.
Yep.
Right, and he has this renewed strength that shocks him. Right, and the renewed strength is that like he's entirely oriented on otherness. Like he's entirely oriented on the willing sacrifice of, I'm going to die after I cross this, but I've got to finish the job, for the sake of those away in the Shire, right? So that they will perhaps receive, the joys of my sacrifice. And that's a beautiful moment. It's a freeing moment for him.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing for Sam was when he throws away his pots and pans. I mean, the embodiment of the theological virtue of hope is Sam bringing his pots and pans into Mordor in case they find a couple brace of conies and they can make a nice little stew. I mean, that's hope, right?
Yeah.
Because I think our age has some understanding of faith and love when we have no understanding of hope. We think it's pie in the sky by and by, and the communists hate it because they're utopians. They want to build it on the earth. They don't like, but hope is what sustains us. We're standing on the promises. We're moving forward. We don't give up, even though we know it's bad and we know we may die. It's amazing every time. And you have to watch the Lord of the Rings series, in one sitting. You need to do it. It takes 12 hours. You have to do the extended version. Forget about the extended. There is only the extended version. You have to watch that. And you have to experience it with Frodo.
Can we sign a petition to remove the originals and just only have the extended versions
this
available?
should only be the extended, yeah. And I think there's some places where they've finally shown them on a big screen, I think.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And you can even go to places now where they show the movie while they play the score live.
Yes. Yeah.
The Houston Symphony died. And I remember paying a lot of money and taking my kids, and I said, this wasn't worth it because the movie is so darn good that after 5 minutes, I completely forgot I was in a live orchestra and just watched the movie. So I might as well stay at home. But still, it's a cool idea. It's just to bring, getting people back to the symphony, which is wonderful because the music is great. I mean, it's just, but.
Let me introduce another one here. I'm just going to kind of throw you some of my favorites here while we're sitting here in Tolkien. There's a line with, I think Galadriel is talking to Frodo. I think it's Frodo. And so they're in Lorien, right? And she has this great line where I think he asks about whether there's really any hope. And she basically says, we've been fighting the long defeat.
Long defeat.
And I love that.
I think Catholics understand that. There's an optimism and a pessimism at the same, right? There's the long defeat, the slow long. They know, and of course, that's a little bit of Tolkien's love of Norse mythology. Everything's leading up to Ragnarok or Gudrun, the Twilight of the Gods, the end of everything. But it's a realistic understanding that we preserve as much as we can, as long as we can. But we know it's going to end in the end, but we still fight for it. It's still beautiful. And we hold on to it, but that's we have stayed
the beautiful thing, and I think this is we were talking with Jacob Benson about this, so that episode released maybe 6 weeks ago, or depending on when this releases. But the resurrection's beautiful, right? That's the victory,
right?
But that doesn't take away, and that's your kind of point earlier about even behold, I'm making all things new as he's bleeding. But there's also beauty in the defeat.
Yeah, there is,
right? And why? Because in his defeat, he is completely oriented to, you could say, the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Right.
right? And that's what Lorien, or that's what Galadriel's kind of getting across there. Is it's like, okay, what would be better, to be Saruman, right? To switch to the side that wins. Let's assume that evil wins, yeah. But you give up on good, true, and beauty. And Galadriel says, no, I would rather fight for goodness and lose than fight for evil and win.
You know, some of the added material is so good you think it's in the novel. The novel does not include Aragorn's rousing speech at the Black Gate. There may come a time when the world of men die, but that day is not today. That whole speech is added and is brilliant. And hopefully Tolkien would have approved. Also, the line, what are we fighting for? That there's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for, is also
Mr.
not
Frodo,
in Lord of the Rings. But I think it fits with everything. Now, a lot of their agenda, of course, they took the so-so death scene of Boromir in the novel, and they made it the best death scene in the history of film. So they did a pretty good job on that. So a lot of stuff. Peter Jackson got it, and he's supposedly making. Well, I can't figure out what's going on. I mean, Rings of Power was a disappointment on the whole. The second season is better than the first season.
I haven't watched this. I watched the first season.
Yeah, the second season
that was
better.
A slow defeat.
Yeah,
that was a slow defeat.
Yeah, led not by Galadriel, but Guy Ladriel, as we call him.
Yeah,
tired of this kick butt girl. Oh my gosh, just
Why do you hate the feminine so much? Right?
Oh my! I know. Yes. Now I will tell you. Oddly enough, even though Snow White, the new Snow White with Rachel Zegler, gives us a mostly annoying Snow White, at the end she wins the day because she's about to be arrested, and then she turns to all the guards and speaks to them by name and says, "Why are you doing this? What about your children?" And she wins with a completely feminine thing. She doesn't kick butt them. So I mean that's pretty amazing, and they stole it because they did the same thing in Aladdin, which was also good in Aladdin, the live action Aladdin. All these live actions are just completely unnecessary, except Cinderella. That was good. But it's interesting that they found a way even at the end, and it works because she is fighting in a feminine way rather than a masculine way, which is wonderful. Right? You watch Game of Thrones? Are you allowed to watch Game of Thrones?
I actually did. I don't think I would watch it again.
I don't. Yeah.
But I did when I was younger.
Yeah, because I mean, there's that great scene when Boromir's wife, Sean Bean's wife, is in that room, and she speaks to every one of them.
Yeah,
it's beautiful, and it shows her feminine strength. It's a great scene. It's in the first season. It's just sort of amazing. Yeah, I don't know if I'd watch it again too.
Yeah, but they do. As I think about it, in that movie, they do kind of keep the masculine and the feminine separate for the most part. Even like Cersei is kind of a Cleopatra. Yeah. She's not like a sword wielder, but she becomes a tyrant, of course, but she becomes a very feminine tyrant.
It is feminine. Well, the best feminine tyrant, maybe in literature, believe it or not, is the one in Harry Potter, the one who takes over. Makes everything pink. What's her name?
Umbridge.
Umbridge, yeah, Miss Umbridge.
I've never hated a character before.
But she is hateful in a completely feminine way. She's like the feminine gone bad, right? And if you listen to her, everything she does is for the president of the Wizards Guild, and I think she believes she's doing everything for him, right? And again, she thinks she's making everything better. She's a very believable villain, and you hate it, especially when you're a kid. You really hate
that actress does that one very well.
Yeah. And the last thing she did was playing Queen Elizabeth II in the final season of The Crown.
Oh, really?
She was Queen Elizabeth II. Yeah, she was good. But anyway, we do have to be careful because Shrek is funny. I mean, Shrek is the most funny when it's making fun of Disney, actually. But we don't need more fractured fairy tales. We need the real fairy tales brought back. We don't need. I speak a lot at I give a lot of graduation commencement speeches for classical Christian schools. And I try to work in there, be careful. The death of learning and wisdom is cynicism. Because we've convinced ourselves that as you go, especially if you go for a PhD, I know I'm getting wiser because I'm getting more cynical, more skeptical. I see through everything now. Remember, Lewis told us that to see through everything is not to see at all. Very good. You know that. That's the end of the last line of the Abolition of Man. The cynicism kills us. We must approach learning with, again, wonder and gratitude and love. That doesn't mean we're not critical, but we don't just figure out, I've figured everything out. I know everything. I've seen through everything. No. That's why I stopped going to your typical academic conferences and go to speak for other places because the people at academic, they've got nothing to learn. They're wiser than Shakespeare. They look down and you should see how they look down on Milton. They say they love Paradise Lost, but they hate Milton. So. Just crazy sort of thing. I say that's not why I went to become an English professor. I don't think it's the way you did. You came out of love, right? You wanted to share your love of these works and what they've done and how they've shaped you. And now you fall into a sort of dwarfish cynicism like the end of the last battle, right? At least we won't be fooled, right? No.
Can you speak to the dwarves? I think that's a great example for our listeners if they've never heard this.
Okay, this is amazing. Okay, in the last battle, it's actually a rather complicated book for kids because as we're getting to near the end, there's the stable.
This is the last book
battle
in the Chronicles
of Narnia. It's the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia, yeah. And so Narnia is about this. This is the revelation of
end
Narnia,
of the world,
right? The end of the world. And when you go through the stable door, you die, right? You've actually died. When the good characters go through the stable door, they find themselves in a restored Garden of Eden, right? And it's beautiful. But the dwarves, who have chosen cunning instead of belief, who have given up, who believe the dwarves are for the dwarves and have gone completely cynical, when they go in there, they think they're in a in a dark, smelly, pokey little stable, right? And the good characters try to convince them, open your eyes, look. And they try to put a flower. That smells terrible. Right? And basically, they are modern empiricists, right? An empiricist, if I can't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, it doesn't exist, right? Well, every single one of their five senses is fooling them because they've given into cunning and deceit and cynicism and skepticism, and they can no longer trust their senses, right? And Lucy tries everything she can to help them. And then all of a sudden, Aslan shows up. And Lucy says, oh, Aslan, can't you do something to help the poor dwarves? And then Aslan speaks the most non-Calvinist line in all of Lewis. Dearest, I will tell you both what I can and cannot do. You hear that? That's a Calvinist fainting. Probably a Lutheran, too.
No. We'd be for that, yeah.
You'll be for it. Good. Okay.
Yeah. God follows his own rules.
Good.
It's an extension of himself.
Good.
Right?
And that's exactly I mean, he does. Don't you think I would, like when Lucy reads the invisibility spell and Aslan's there, don't you think I would follow my own spells? Like,
yes, yeah.
So he roars and out comes a feast. And at first, the dwarves are eating it, but it quickly becomes clear that they're not really tasting it. Then they think somebody's got better food. Back and forth, and they just give up. All right, the dwarves are for the dwarves. We won't be taken in again. Wow. And then Aslan explains to Lucy, you see, they have chosen cunning instead of belief. Their prison is only in their mind, but they are in that prison and so afraid of being taken in that they cannot be taken out. They can't go. They could be in heaven. They won't even be able to see it because they have chosen. You've met somebody where God literally did a miracle in your life, and the other one's like, I don't see it.
Yes.
Right? Just a coincidence. Look, I'm telling you it's a miracle, and I don't see it. Right? Look, Lewis begins his book Miracles by saying, I've only met one man who said he saw a ghost, but he didn't believe it.
Yeah.
So even though Americans say seeing is believing, are you close to Missouri, the show me state, right? We say seeing is believing, but more often than not, believing is seeing. If you don't believe it, you won't see it.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
Excellent.
Right in front of your eyes, God will do something and you won't see it. You'll just, Jesus heals a man born blind. That's one thing that never happened in the Old Testament. And the only thing the Pharisees see is Sabbath. Unbelievable. So we can be as blind as a bat.
It's like that great line in Brothers Karamazov, Father
Zosima.
Father Zosima, it really gets played up.
Alyosha, you're talking about
it's like heaven is all around you if only you have the eyes to see it.
That's it. And I know that some people think, you're saying heaven is just subjective. You're not, okay? It's there. Look, it's not like earth is here and heaven's up there. Heaven is all around us, and it's always breaking in. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, it's always breaking in. Remember, we always teach Sunday school kids, Jesus spoke in parables so everybody could understand him. And of course, Jesus says exactly the opposite. I speak in parables so only those that have eyes to see can see and ears to hear can hear. And he's not going to throw pearls before swine. But if you have the eyes to see, then you will see the deeper layers of meaning. And again, imagination often helps you to see. Did you see Star Trek, the motion picture? The first one? Very long, very boring. But it's a shame because the best part was cut out because they decided to keep all the special effects and they cut out all the dialogue that was more important. Because what's happening is Star Trek, the motion picture, Spock is going through this ritual where he's trying to purge all of his emotions so he can be purely logical, right? Because half Vulcan and half human, trying to purge it. And then in the thing, they find this thing called V'ger, right? And again, spoiler alert, the movie's like 35 years old, right? V'ger is Voyager. And we sent Voyager 1 up into space, and it fell into a black hole, and it got caught by like a race of sentient computers, and it upgraded Voyager, V'ger, because the dirt is still on it. It looks like V'ger. They've upgraded him so he knows everything. But V'ger discovers that he is now blocked. He cannot go further because there are certain dimensions of reality that cannot be accessed by logic and reason alone that take an imaginative leap. And so he is stymied. And that, if you see the full version, that's when Spock has his moment of enlightenment that he should not be. He's becoming like V'ger. He thinks if he purges all emotion, he'll be pure logic, but he is going to put himself in a box because we often need an imaginative leap to get there. So again, the discovery of, okay, when the apple fell on Newton's head, okay, it's not like, oh, apples fall. Everybody knows apples fall, right? The point is that something happened. He had a aha moment, and he said, what if the relationship between the tree and the apple falling is like the universe and a planet, right? That's when he suddenly had his idea of the theory of gravitation and, what they used to call movement at a distance, attraction at a distance. How does that work, right? But it was an imaginative leap, an aha moment, and then he had to spend a long time to put it into a principle.
Can you to expound on this, right? Because, I think there's a lot of modern implications with AI and, the rise of technology and whatnot, but that's a key point that Lewis gets at in that hideous strength, right? When he's dealing with the NICE, and he's dealing in the way that everyone's compartmentalized. There is kind of a hyper logic, there's the priest that, his vision is like almost like the moon. Yeah, that everything
cold, sterile, dead.
Yeah. So can you comment on what Lewis is getting at there?
Again, it becomes, this is amazing how prescient that book was. That book was about 1945 or so 80 years now. And in it, they have used science and technology to preserve the decapitated head of a criminal. And they call it the head. And they almost worship the head. And by the end, we find
real
out...
quick, can you pull up that hideous strength meme? It'll probably be or not meme, GIF.
Oh, that's cool.
GIF with a liquor bottle. It's really funny. I'll show it to you. Go ahead, keep going.
Good.
He'll pull it up for us when he gets it.
So they're following the head, but they soon realize that the head itself is basically possessed by demons. So that these scientists are being possessed by demons. Screwtape Letter says that we, the devils, are trying to perfect, because, okay, there's a cruel dilemma for the devils, right? If the devil shows himself to us, he can terrify us, but it's kind of hard to be an atheist. If he hides himself, he can make secular people, but he loses his direct terrorism, right? But don't worry, he says, a time is coming when we, the devils, will create our best creation, the materialist magician, right? The person who, while not believing in spiritual forces, is actually tapping into bad spiritual forces. And we see that. And even he says, like, the worship of sex itself is a spiritual kind of thing that we're doing, the cutting up the body, all that's the cutting. Because, look, we talked about the Passion of the Christ. One of the most brilliant things that Mel Gibson did is the Satan in that movie is purposely made androgynous. Now, it's played by a woman. It's played by an actress, but it is made androgynous because Satan hates our humanity. He certainly hates our masculinity and femininity. He would destroy it. In fact, Lewis suggests one of the reasons that Satan rebelled is when God talked about creating embodied creatures. For Satan, that was like slumming. What do you mean? What are you doing? Because Satan's a good Gnostic. What are you doing? Mixing flesh with spirit. That's disgusting. We don't know if that, but that problem, I'm sure upset him. Whether that was the trigger, I don't know. But it's an interesting concept. But but again, we have to be careful. Again, a lot of people are messing with demons when they think they're messing with science. That's what was so weird about episode 1 when what are they called? The midichlorians or something like that? It's Star Trek, Star Wars 1. Yeah, the midichlorians. What's that all about?
Yeah.
And if you listen carefully,
that's how Anakin gets conceived, right?
Yeah. Nobody seems to make it, but basically Anakin was a virgin birth.
Yeah.
What the heck? Nobody even talked about that. Did I just hear that? What is going on
here? They
here?
can't help themselves. Back to your point, mostly in the last episode, but a little bit here too.
Yeah. It's crazy. I don't know. But then he has to come back. It's still evil. Evil is evil.
Do you find the meme?
Let's get. Well, you can explain it. Describe it.
Yeah, so it's a picture of a liquor bottle, and it's that hideous strength. Yep, that one's it. You want to pop it up?
Oh,
yeah.
like
So it's a
technology.
picture of a liquor bottle. It's got the picture of that C.S. Lewis, The Hideous Strength. And at the beginning, it's like, well, this book is off to a slow start. And then by the end of the bottle, it's, I'm now fully convinced that our scientists are talking to demons.
That's good. Yeah, I know. It's like, what do you do? What are you messing with? Be careful when you start messing with these things.
Yeah, the book. I mean, it does have a slow start for those that haven't read. Which I love that Lewis does that. He's not trying to. All the books now, it's like the first page to hook you in because there's a million books that you can choose from. But he knows, the right people are reading his book, and so he's going to take the time to build a crescendo and to build. It begins as a
domestic melodrama with an unhappily married couple. I mean, it's amazing, and then it builds and builds and builds. And no, I mean, in some ways, everything of Lewis is in That Hideous Strength. He really combined everything. Now, his favorite was Perelandra, and also Till We Have Faces. But he really loved Perelandra as one of his best books. The beautiful descriptions of Venus and whatnot. And by the way, if you want to understand masculine and femininity, read the last chapter of Perelandra, where he sees the guardian angel of Venus and Mars, and talk about men are from Mars and women are from Venus. He gets to the essence of masculinity and femininity, something that goes even beyond our sexual body parts, goes to the core, to the soul of it. Now, don't be confused when you read it, because Lewis is trying to find a word deeper than sex, so he uses the word gender, because he doesn't know what's going to happen to the word gender. Okay, so you might be confused reading it today. But he's trying to say there is a deeper reality to masculinity and femininity that goes even deeper than our reproductive parts.
Yeah, because he paints it as, how does he put it? Like, it's something that washes over all things, right? So I mean, he highlights that language, embodies this. That there's other things that have masculine, feminine, gender.
They meet us,
but when it applies to the human, it's sex. Like we have a male and a female, but there's other masculine and feminine, and that's. I could maybe hang my hat on that being my favorite quote.
Oh, that's great.
One was rhythm, the other was melody.
Right.
One the masculine, its eyes were like gazing outward, like
a guard, holding a sword, and
one remembering where hence the danger came.
Right.
And then the feminine, it's inward, right? And hence why the lands flow and move, and it's just I wrote my master's thesis on that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was 70% of my master's thesis. Right. The other one was the inner circle that Lewis.
Oh, the inner ring is the great evil. That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, I would love for someone with a PhD to just take, because there's so there's that point it's in That Hideous Strength where Jane goes to St. Anne's,
right?
And before she meets with Ransom, she opens the book. And she thinks the thought in the garden on the way in, and then she reads it in the book. And it's something like the female's desire as well as the male. The female's longing is as long as the male. Both the male and the female longing is for the female. And he's not talking about lesbianism or anything like that. But he's saying what is the source of beauty? What is kind of the highlight of creation? And it is that feminine spirit. Right?
And that's something
he's really getting in so many different ways. He's highlighting
and
the
that's
beauty
something
of
Christianity does, because in ancient Greece the standard of beauty was the male. The male statue, the Olympic athlete, right? And that changes where Beatrice becomes, first of all, the word virtue actually means literally manliness in Latin, but suddenly Beatrice becomes an embodiment of virtue in Dante, and there's changes going on there, but it's coming from Christianity. Can
I ask you something? Okay, so I've got so many things I want to ask you.
But before we go, by the way, you do understand where Lewis is getting this idea of Jane in a garden picking up a book and reading it. That is the Confessions of St. Augustine. That's what he's playing on.
Oh, really?
And he's also, and in some ways, he identifies more with Jane in that book than he does with Mark. Mm-hmm. He also was resistant right to the end, like Jane is, not willing to give in and let go.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful scene.
Oh,
but yeah, it's Augustine in the garden. Take it and read, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so I want to ask you about this, because this one is, I rarely, tear up. Actually, as I get older and I have kids now, that happens.
Yeah, you do.
I don't know if I can fully say that now, but at the end of A Grief Observed,
oh wow,
that is just so moving. So he finishes, and I want to ask you about this, because I had to work hard to research this.
Oh yeah,
I'm not a great linguist, so I had to.
Oh, when he quotes Italian,
yeah, right.
So he turned away from me.
Yeah, so he's got at the end, she looked not at me but at the priest,
right?
And then and found peace or whatever, and then por si torno eterno fontana.
That is right.
And she returned to the fountain, which comes from Dante.
Okay,
can you explain this?
It's so beautiful. When I suddenly realized what was going on there. So Dante, Virgil's his guide for the first two books, but then Beatrice is his guide takes him up and up and up.
Can you explain who Beatrice is in, in Dante's life?
So Beatrice becomes his. It was a woman he loved, but from afar, like courtly love. There was no sexual. They each married different people.
Well, she
and
died.
Then Beatrice, she died young. Okay. She married, but then she died young.
Oh, okay.
And Beatrice was his ideal. He wrote a series of poems called La Vita Nova, the New Life. And he said, someday I will write something worthy of her. That she was an embodiment of beauty and grace and virtue. And she becomes Dante's guide through
And that's why
Paradise.
he wrote the book, right? I mean, he wrote the book as a homage to her.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just great. The beauty of it, right? But as they get to the top, earlier when he first meets Beatrice in the Garden of Eden, he sees Beatrice and then he turns and Virgil's gone, right? When he gets right to the end, the mystic rose is the beautiful place where all the souls in heaven are. And he turns and he sees Saint Bernard, not the dog, but the saint, who's going to be his lady. And he turns to Beatrice and she's gone. Beatrice is now back to her place in the mystic rose. And she is now 1,000,000 miles away from him. But it's like she's right next to him. Because all the boundaries of time and space have been eradicated. And she's right there. And Beatrice, one last time, looks down on him and smiles. And then she turns her face to turns her face back to God.
To the
turns her
eternal
face
fountain.
to the eternal fountain. So it's this beautiful moment. So she becomes his Beatrice for a moment. Dante's Virgil and Beatrice is George MacDonald in A Grief Observed. I'm sorry, in
Great Divorce.
The Great Divorce, okay? But here, it's that great love affair, but it must give way.
Yeah.
Now she's taken him so far, and now she turns away and yearns to be with God.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful.
And that's Lewis's final epiphany in A Grief Observed, which is him mourning Joy, who's his wife, who dies from, is it cancer? Or, she dies, and so the book's beautiful, goes through all that. But it's so amazing that that's his final, you could probably say final comfort. It's it's his closing lines, right?
Right.
Is that Joy was never his.
Right.
There was a time where he could walk with Joy, his wife, but she belongs to the fountain. She belongs to God, and he has to be at peace with that.
And you realize it's a great godly pun, because surprised by joy, you have to let go of the joy so you can seek the source of the joy.
And he says, what kind of special part of hell is it that I would have her back?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
That I would call her back from heaven to be with me. That's not love, that's hatred. And of course, in The Great Divorce, with the mother, he plays that out. I mean, that might be the best part of the whole book.
Yeah, she's ready to bring her son down to hell with her so she can take better care of him.
Yeah. The motherly tyranny, not motherly love.
The other part that's kind of an epiphany that's in Shadowlands, the original BBC version. Lewis, as he's getting to the end, he says, picture a man in total darkness. Because he is in darkness, he thinks he's in a dungeon under the earth. And then suddenly, he hears a sound. It may be the sound of rain or cows lowing or the distant water. And suddenly he realizes he's not in a dungeon, but in the open air. Now, in a sense, his condition has not changed. He still waits in darkness. But now he knows that the unseen realm is greater than he can imagine. He finally understands his true position. He might have had Tennyson in mind. I was like a child crying, but now he's a child who knows his father is near. He wrote a poem called In Memoriam. That's the greatest book on grieving. It's actually even greater than Grief Observed. And Lewis was influenced by it. But Tennyson, the Victorian writer, it's really great. But yes, it is. Again, we have to step back and see our true condition. That's the thing, right? His famous line from The Problem of Pain: God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. You remember that? That's a Problem with Pain. And by the way, if you really want to get into Lewis, read A Problem with Pain, and then right after read A Grief Observed. Because in A Problem with Pain, he's a young man who is dealing with the problem of pain theologically and philosophically and brilliantly. But then the old man is dealing with the problem of pain experientially, anecdotally. And it's just fascinating to read those two books back to back. I mean, they were written 20 years apart, but to see them back to back, you realize, wow. It's almost like God forced Lewis to wrestle with everything there is. And, this poor bachelor at the end of his life, he comes out of his shell, has this marriage. And now God granted him an extended leave. She had cancer, but she got better, and they lived together for 2 years, husband and wife, and then 3 years, and then cancer came back. Shadowlands is a good movie. Both the Hollywood version with Anthony Hopkins, But also there's an earlier BBC version with Joss Ackland and Claire Bloom that's actually a little more faithful to the story.
Okay.
They're both worth seeing.
I haven't,
and
as much
there's
as
also,
I love Lewis, I haven't
you have
watched
to.
anything. I'm always scared.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
it's kind of like the Rings of Power, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
scared it's going to warp my vision. But maybe I should watch it.
especially if you see the BBC version, the guy who wrote it.
But having
the guy
Anthony
who,
Hopkins, I mean,
the guy who wrote is a secular writer. He also was one of the writers on Gladiator. I mean, he's a secular writer, but he just got a lot right in there. It's really quite beautiful.
Okay, let me throw something else. This has kind of turned into me throwing some of my favorite things, and I just want to kind of learn from you on these. So one of it captures it's one of those areas where I'm like, okay, Lewis is getting, once again, it's that cosmic type theology and vision where I'm like, he's seeing something here that I haven't turned that corner. I don't know what vision he's seeing, but I know it's beautiful and it's deep. And it's the chapter in that hideous strength. They pulled deep heaven down upon their heads. Right. And so it's the chapter where you've got ransom.
Yes.
And maybe you could even comment on the importance of Merlin.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so many questions. But so you have ransom, Merlin. I don't even know if I can give the backdrop. It would take too long to try to paint that story. But go ahead.
Have you read Planet Narnia by Michael Ward?
I've read a third of it. Shame on me.
Oh, yeah, because that is not only one of the best books ever written on Narnia, it's one of the best books written on the Ransom trilogy. And what he shows, his basic argument is that the 7 Chronicles of Narnia are keyed to the 7 medieval planets and their influences, because we lived in a sympathetic universe, and as they rotated in their sphere, they shed down an influence. This is also it's in Discarded Image. They draw a certain metal out of the earth, and they draw a certain personality type. So the moon, the influence of the moon, draws silver out of the earth, but it causes lunacy in us. Mercury draws out mercury, quicksilver, and it makes us mercurial, going all over the place, as merchants do, which also comes from the same word, right? The sun produces gold, and it makes us. I guess I skipped Venus. Venus makes us. It produces copper, and it makes us amorous. The sun
what's
produces
amorous?
gold. Amorous, loving.
Yeah,
like amor. Right? And then the sun makes gold, and it makes us wise and generous. And you move on up. Mars makes us martial, and it produces iron. And what's the next one? Saturn. No, Jupiter's next. Jupiter makes tin, oddly, which is no longer as beautiful as it used to be because of tin cans, but it used to be beautiful. But it makes us jovial, which is a kind of joy that is best expressed in Father Christmas, which is why Father Christmas is in Lord of the Rings and is in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because it's the jovial book. And then said, okay, well, what's happening now, to come back to your thing, when the planets come down, they are bringing their influence down. So Mercury comes down, and whereas
and
Mercury,
by the way, in this book, the planet and the angel that's in charge of the planet is one and the same.
Right. That's okay.
Right. So it's an angel that's coming down, but it's also the planet coming down.
Right. And it is. I mean, that goes back to Plato, the idea that there was they used to call them the intelligence of the sphere. John Donne talks about it in his poetry all the time. This intelligence of the sphere, which is the angel, which becomes, Lewis calls it the Oyarsa, the guardian. And he says that Satan was the guardian angel of Earth, but he fell and went bad, and that's why we live in the silent planet, Tholkandra, because we're in cosmic quarantine. Yeah. It's wonderful. That's the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
But so what's happening is, but here's the thing about influence, okay? The influence of Mars, if you're a bad person, it may make you into a tyrant and a murderer, Genghis Khan or something. But if you're a good person, it may make you into a soldier of Christ or even a martyr. So when the influences of the planet come down, Mercury comes down. Mercury strengthens the speech of the Society of St. Anne, but it babbles the languages of the nice of Belbury, so they no longer understand each other. So they're reacting in different ways. Man, it's so wonderful to watch the feminists at the end when Jane is told, write no more dissertations, have babies.
Yeah.
It's just great. By the way, Lewis is not technically Dr. Lewis. He was given, I think, some honorary degrees. We thought it's a ridiculous waste of time to write a dissertation. So he didn't do that. A lot of them didn't do that. Okay. Yeah, so in that sense, he's not technically Dr. Lewis. That's just an American obsession. But that's because we've all been created by the German university, which is all about research. More and more specialized. And Lewis was like, really? Let's read the books. Let's read the old books.
Wisdom for scholars.
Yeah, wisdom. That's right. Wisdom, and struggle with them, right? But so that's what's happening. They all come down, and they all start acting mercurial. and they all start acting amorous, right? Even the animals are getting amorous, right? As the different things come down.
Yeah.
So he's playing. So, I think that's one of the reasons that Ward saw what was going on. Lewis wrote when he was younger a little poem called The Planets, where some of his descriptions sound like the Narnia books. But you got to get Michael Ward on here at some point.
Hopefully next spring.
I hope so,
yeah. He hasn't committed, but he said that he would like to, and if we can get the travel plans nailed out next spring.
It's a great book.
We love that. Yeah.
It's funny. I told him I should have written that book. I've been taking everybody through Narnia, and I've been lecturing on the discarded image for 20 years, but I never made the connection. And I'm glad I didn't, because I could not have. Michael Ward, it's just a monumental book.
Yeah.
I would have. By the time he did that, I would have written 3 books. I don't have the patience to do that kind of stuff. It's like I want to read and get the ideas out. But his job is so thoroughly researched, and the notes and everything, and it's really, and he speaks beautifully. I heard him speak on it again. But again, the idea is that when we read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we are experiencing the influence of Jupiter. It's more subliminal. We know what it means to live under that influence.
And that's the joy.
Yeah, that's the joy. Or Mars. Prince Caspian is the martial book.
Yeah.
Remember how the air of Narnia strengthens them and they become more martial and more brave, right? So it's all those different things. But it's pretty good. He does a good job with it. But that will help you understand that last chapter, because that's what's happening. The influences of those meaningful spheres descend onto Bellberry, and they strengthen the good carriage while destroying the bad carriage. It's actually a rather violent end for children. They all turn against each other and kill each other.
Yeah.
The wild animals. But by the way, Lewis was an early person that was completely against animal experimentation. They called it vivisection back then. The animals they were turning on them and destroy them and devour them. So it's kind of bloody.
Yeah.
But wow, man.
One more quick question, then I want to hear your thoughts on The Abolition of Man.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because, that's just such an important book.
And by the way, that hideous strength is a sort of novelization of The Abolition of Man. Lewis said that himself.
Okay. So there's a part, I think it's maybe in that hideous strength, or it could be somewhere else, where it might be Out of the Silent Planet, where they talk, I think it's Jupiter, or maybe it's Saturn, and they almost get hushed. Do you remember that?
Oh,
and it's almost right. So he's kind of portraying these different things about the planets. But there's the one where it's like they don't even speak about it.
Right.
But there's some kind of maybe like deep beauty there.
When you get to Saturn makes you Saturnine, which is heavy and almost melancholy and contemplative.
Maybe it was.
So I think that's probably that hideous strength.
Okay.
And when Dante's Paradiso works with those same things as well. When they get down there. So now normally the influence of Saturn, which makes you Saturnine, can make you heavy and melancholy and depressed, but it can also make you a contemplative if you receive it properly. So in Dante's level of Saturn are all the monks and contemplatives, and there's this Jacob's ladder going all the way up to heaven. So all those different things. Or under Mars are the soldiers of the faith, but many of them are also the martyrs of the faith, as well as the soldiers of the faith. And then Jupiter are the great rulers, like David and Judas Maccabeus, and no, he's a warrior. Constantine, stuff like that. The great warriors and the great kings. Hezekiah is there too.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it's just it's a whole nother way of looking at the universe, looking at the cosmos. And Michael Ward shows that Lewis was a sort of amateur astronomer. He had his own telescope and stuff like that, so he was very savvy about what's going on with the stars.
Yeah. Maybe I'll ask one more here, and then we'll go to hideous strength. So I'd love to look into it, right? But so what's the importance of Merlin, Arthur, and the Pendragon?
Oh, it's wild,
right? Because I don't know English.
Now it is. Remember the story of King Arthur is that King Arthur is not dead. He's asleep on Avalon, waiting for when the world needs him, and then he will come back and take Excalibur and save the world. So he's kind of waiting to come back. It's interesting he chooses to use Merlin rather than Arthur. Merlin seems to be, by the way, we find out that both Merlin and Arthur are sleeping on Paralandra, on Venus, along with Elijah and Enoch, all waiting there for the end. It's really cool. I think he says that in Paralandra. Or he might say in that hideous strength. But anyway, the Merlin seems to represent a sort of dark magic that is very hard to tame. Okay, remember in Prince Caspian when
Bacchus?
Yeah, Bacchus comes back, right? What are they doing? And, Susan says, I think I would be afraid of those wild Maenad girls if Aslan wasn't with. She says, of course, right? So, that wild, you might call it divine madness that is needed to shatter the chains of the Telmarines. You need that divine madness. And he sort of represents that Merlin. Some people believe, and I think so, that he partly pattern Merlin on the old William Butler Yeats that he met when Yeats was an old man. Because Lewis, there was a brief time when the atheist Lewis was caught up in the occult, and he even saw it as a sort of sexual kind of thing. He was caught up in the occult. And so Merlin does, in a sense, need to be tamed a little bit. But he's the dark power of England, in that sense.
But he lived at a time when it was kind of agnostic, right? Meaning, right, it wasn't yet so tainted. It was always dangerous. Right. It reached a point where it was now completely off limits.
Right.
Right. And I kind of think about that with when you've got, is it Abraham and his sons? Or not his son, I mean, like one son, or Abraham and his household when the angels are going to come and the message like, put your idols away.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you're like, okay, so they've got these idols. Like, what are these idols? And they don't say destroy these idols. They say put those away, right? So there's this aspect where there was some kind of, they had idols there. Right. They're not really rebuked for it, but they are told to put it away. But so there's almost a sense of like there's things that are more neutral that eventually become non-neutral.
Well, this is something, that with Paradise Lost. All of the demons in Paradise Lost are given the names of Moloch and Baal and Belial and, all Dagon and all that sort of stuff. But the way Milton portrays it is that the gods of Babylon and Persia and Philistine, they're all really evil, whereas the Greek gods are like in this cold middle level. They're still pagan, but they're not quite as evil as those other gods. And he puts the Norse gods there too, like Baldur and stuff. So there are levels or gradations. We mentioned before, maybe the last podcast, G.K. Chesterton, the War of the Gods and Demons, where the Romans are the good pagans and the Carthaginians are the bad pagans. And they're having that war between them because the Carthaginians were Baal worshippers. In fact, Hannibal means the grace of Baal. They sacrificed their children. They put them through the fire. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of like I have a little bit more trouble when I deal with the ancient Greeks and Romans and even with Buddhism and Hinduism. That's all stuff that comes before Christ. So you can see it leading up to Christ. It's a little bit harder when I deal with the Quran because the Quran is a Christian heresy, ultimately.
Yep.
And so it's a little more difficult when you're dealing with that because it came afterwards. But the stuff that came before is the groping.
So it's almost like a retardation or a twisting of that to where the other one has this preliminary, which we're talking about.
It's coming, it's reaching, it's groping.
Yeah.
Right? Though he's not far from any of us, friend, and we live and move and have our being. Right?
Which is why Judaism in many ways has gone, whatever you want to call it, has gone stale. Right. Like it's gone stale because it's lost its sacrificial system, it's lost its temple, it's lost all of these things. To whereas Old Testament, it's moving towards the Messiah, and that which is after is kind of like, I don't want to put him in the same category as Islam, right? But it's still something that's rejected. Even sometimes those notions, like the prophetic notions of the Messiah, it doesn't seem. I'm not an expert, but it doesn't seem to be a focus. The sacrificial system is obviously not a focus, right?
I grew up, evangelical, and everybody was very, very premillennial, looking to the end. They're going to rebuild the temple. And I just thought about something, if the Jews rebuild the temple and then they start the sacrifices again, they are going to have to deal with a foe far more terrifying than Hamas. PETA. It took a while. You got that there. Very good. Very good.
Bennett got it right away.
People, man. Could you imagine?
I heard him laugh and I knew it was a joke.
Can you imagine if they started sacrificing animals? My God, they would attack them more than anything else.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, that's just crazy. But
so let's move. Let's jump into that hideous strength. Let's take a quick break and then we'll jump back in.
I think you mean that the abolition of man.
Abolition of man.
Abolition,
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Bennett says we are back. Okay. The abolition of man. Take us through, and especially I think the first is important from an educational standpoint, but the third book is captivating, right? I mean, that's where he's uncovering, it's incredibly deep. So walk us through with that in mind.
Let's talk about how he compares Bacon and Faust. Now, Bacon is Francis Bacon, the inventor of the scientific method, and Faust is the guy who sold his soul to the devil, right? So he says that the real magic that tries to control things is much closer to science than it is to religion, right? Because Francis Bacon coined the phrase, knowledge is power. We have knowledge over nature and we can control nature. And that's what the dark magic is all about, the control and domination of nature. That's not what true religion is about. It's not about domination. If it is your will, Father, follow it. So he starts, again, because, we have this idea that the magic and superstition, that's Christianity. But he says, no, that the dark power got caught up with the modern science that wanted to use science in a technological way. Rather than understanding God's creation and praising him for it, we're going to use it as a weapon to control and dominate. Right? And for instance, we always have this idea that communists are left and so they love the environment. No, the Soviets and the Maoists destroyed their environment because everything was about man's science and we're going to force nature to do everything. A true Christianity is about stewardship. We're stewards of God. That's the job God gave us, to take care of it, right? That doesn't mean we worship nature. Nature serves us, but we are benevolent, rulers of nature. That's the way it's supposed to be. So again, he talks about, we have to be careful because, all right, what he calls the Tao, that's the universal moral ethical code. The Tao is a package deal. Like the 10 commandments are the 10 commandments. They're not the 2 commandments and the 8 suggestions, right? And what happens in modernism is we often take one element of the Tao and then break all the rest of it to hold that up. This is what often happens in a dystopia, right? So, yeah, the idea of equality is a good idea, and it's ultimately a biblical one because any real equality is only based upon the imago Dei. We're all made in the image of God, right? But they take equality in communism, and it becomes everything. So then in the name of equality, you could do every possible evil that you want, right? With the fascists, right? The idea of patriotism or the idea of love of country, that's a good thing. That's part of the Tao. But when you allow that to become so crazy that you can break every other rule, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Brian, I remember when I was a kid, I went to a drive-in theater and we were watching the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. Mm-hmm. And I looked next to me and the couple in the next car was breaking 7 of them. It's amazing. Okay, anyway, so Ben is trying to count how you can do 7 sins in a car, but he's getting there. He's getting there. But the point here is that we have to understand that the utopian makes his own morality. He often begins by taking a real moral code, but so twists it out of its original envelope and is willing to do it. Like the scientists in That Hideous Strength at the Nice, right? Mm-hmm. They're willing to do anything, to destroy, to do anything to get across their utopic ideas. So, again, he's cautioning us. See, first he tells us what happens to education when you throw out the Tao, when you throw out any kind of moral code. But then he says what happens to society when you do that, right? And then this society wants to build a utopia, right? But the only way it can do it is through social engineering. You begin by objectifying nature. That means turning nature into an object, a thing that you can do things to. But sooner or later, you end up treating man the same way. And you end up with a group of conditioners that will change and alter man to suit this utopian idea. And all of it's done in the name of man's freedom. But in doing that, you abolish man because you have now made everything controlled by just a few conditioners. They're the ones that make the choices. But when you get to a point, if you're the conditioner, I'm trying to...
Can you define what the conditioner is?
Okay, the conditioners are, they begin by being the eugenicists that are creating perfect people, but they're the ones that are doing the social engineering to create the perfect people. Right?
So they're using science in order to control the way humanity operates.
Right, and that's kind of what the Nice is doing in That Hideous Strength.
Yep.
But here's the problem. Once they themselves step outside of the Tao, they have no more boundaries, no more moral sense, how are they going to make their decisions? Well, they're going to make their decisions by whether they have a stomach ache that day and what the condition of the weather is. And so now they're making their choices based on their own desires and instincts, but those desires and instincts are coming from nature. And so at the very moment we think we've abolished nature, nature has abolished us. So we thought nature was going like this, I surrender, like the French army. We think that we are like nature, putting up our arms, when nature was actually reaching out her arms to embrace us forever. That's the meaning of the title, The Abolition of Man. We think that we've escaped from nature, but now nature controls us because the humans who control us are only controlled by their base instincts, which ultimately comes from nature, right? Mm-hmm. Crazy sort of scary stuff. But we sort of see this happening in a way, right? When we throw out all standards, anything goes. Did you think that you would actually hear intelligent PhD people, politicians saying it's okay to put people on puberty blockers or to mutilate their bodies? And yet they are. They get to a point where anything goes. So it's very serious. So that's what it can do to a society that loses its moorings in. See, okay. A lot of people say, well, obviously morality is man-made because we have to teach morality to our children. Now that sounds like a good argument, but we also have to teach our children the mathematical tables. And math is not something we invent. Math is something we discover. Well, virtue and morality are not just preferences. They're like the mathematical table. They are written into the weave of the cosmos that God created. So again, virtue is bringing yourself into a proper alignment with the nature of reality. And when we cut ourselves off from that reality, we end up becoming a slave to our own lusts, right? If I'm an absolute tyrant, the only thing I'm going to listen to are my own desires and lusts. But our own desires and lusts are the very things that destroy us, aren't they? They don't make us better. Plato knew this. That's what Plato said in the Republic. The absolute tyrant is the most enslaved person of all because he only listens to his base desires, and your base desires are always the things that destroy you. So he is a slave to the worst slave master of all, his base instincts and desires. So, again, Lewis is taking Plato, it's a fuller Christian understanding, but it still was understood by Plato in a very real way.
Well, I like that notion where, it's often, I think Paul talks about it maybe the most, of being like a slave to Christ.
Right.
And there's that notion that you always belong to something. And the modern notion is always, what is freedom? Freedom is, me standing above as many choices as possible. Right. And then I'm free. Right. But of course, well, which one are you going to choose? Well, it's going to be based on whatever you're actually enslaved to, your desires, maybe your pride, maybe your career advancement, maybe respect from your peers, honor, whatever it is, that will then become the master, and that becomes a tyrant. Wow. Christ is the only master that actually, makes you free. And that's where, Bishop Barron does a great job talking about, the biblical sense of freedom. And he says, it's not about being a master over many things. It's about it's about the ability to do the right thing, and then it becomes seamless. Right. So you're oriented towards the Tao.
What you're saying is that virtue is its own reward. The more you practice virtue, the more you enjoy virtue. Kant really led us astray by making virtue only about duty. So if you enjoy your duty, it's not really duty anymore. That's terrible. But there are a lot of, usually there's sort of white northern Christians who if I'm enjoying working at the soup kitchen, I guess it's not charity anymore. Not understanding that if it's true charity, it will change you so that you enjoy it, right? Love your enemies doesn't mean feel warm fuzzies towards them. That's impossible. It means treat them as if you love them. But if you do that after a while, you may be able to have some sense of pity or feeling towards them because it is our actions that should drive our emotions and not vice versa. We've got it all mixed up, right? We want our emotions to drive everying.
And then they both play off each other, right? There's that great C.S. Lewis line where he says, first the Germans killed the Jews, and then they hated the Jews.
Yes. Right, yes.
You remember that? And so there's this action where it interplays.
If you are working in an office and the head guy treats one of your coworkers in a very nasty manner, you might think to yourself, you know what? I'll bet for the next month the boss is going to actually be nicer to this guy now because of what he did. Actually, the boss is going to be nastier because I'm not a bad person. So if I treated them badly, it must be because they deserve it. And so you actually treat them worse. That's terrible. Now, it can also work the opposite if you're doing it the right way. Right? The more you love someone, the better you're going to treat them. That's the plot of Fireproof, right? Treat your wife as if you love her for a month, and then the feelings will return, which sounds hypocritical to the modern American. Everything's got to be authentic, but that's the way the human animal works. We should be driven. As Aristotle said, and Lewis completely agreed, virtue is not a feeling. Virtue is a habit. Virtue is an action that when done again and again becomes a habit so that you are instinctively courageous, right? Courageous doesn't mean I'm not afraid. It means even when I'm afraid, I stay at my post. But as you do that, you will see that the feelings of courage will return. Again, that's the way we're built. And when we forget that, it causes great destruction to society.
Can you speak to the men without chests?
Oh, yeah.
Particularly that great quote at the end. Castrate and bid the gilding be fruitful.
Okay, he borrows a metaphor from Lewis, right? Lewis says that our soul is tripartite. There is the rational part of our soul, right, that he links to the head. There is the appetitive part that he links to the belly, the I want. And then there is the spirited part, which is linked to the chest.
Is this coming from Aristotle?
It's actually coming from Plato.
Oh, from Plato.
Plato.
Okay, so Lewis is borrowing it from Plato.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we got this tripartite idea. And the head rules the belly through the chest. And if you lose the chest, the part where the Tao is, the part where good imagination and love and patriotism and wonder and joy and all that's there, right? If you lose that and it's a straight war against head and belly, the belly's going to win every time. The head cannot do it alone. It needs the chest to come to it. But what we've been doing in modern America for the last 100 years, Europe, is we've ridiculed the chest. We ridicule on it. We make fun of any notion that there might be absolute transcendent standards of goodness, truth, and beauty. It's all, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's all of that. And we cause the chest to shrivel. But then there's the irony, Lewis says, the great irony of all, right? We remove the organ, chest, and we demand the function. We create men without chests, and we expect of them virtue and enterprise, right? We ridicule honor, and then we're shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful, which is exactly what's happening today, right? Amazing, terrifying, right? So we know as at the very moment he says we're calling out, where are the courageous kids? Well, there are no, we crush them, okay? When I'm at my post and the enemy's coming to me, I don't stay there because I work through some logical, categorical imperative. I stay there because I look up and sing, and I'm proud to be an American. And it is the simplest song, right, that the PhD makes fun of and scorns, that is at the core of the spirited part of us that has love and joy and power. And that's what he means by men without chests. We're shriveling it. Now, it looks like we're getting smarter, but our heads are the same size. They only look bigger because our chest is shriveled away, right? And we lose the balance that it's actually a little bit like id, ego, and superego by Freud. Of course, that's completely naturalistic and materialistic for Freud. There's no God or spirit. But there's an understanding of the parts of us and how there needs to be a balance. Look, let's put it this way. Not only do we have to teach our children and our students virtue, we have to teach them the proper way to feel about virtue. We have to teach them to feel joy when they do something virtuous and feel bad about themselves when they do something vicious. Oh, you can't do that. You're going to hurt their self-esteem. The self-esteem movement is the worst thing that's ever happened in education. Kids are never allowed to feel bad about themselves. That's how you create monsters, right? Your son does something bad. You say, John, I was ashamed of you today. Well, that's what he should do. John, I was proud of you. Right? Now, after you say, I'm ashamed of you, and he goes like this, the next thing you do is not to say, but it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. What you say is, but I love you, and then you reach out and hug them. You are valuable to me. In fact, it's because you're valuable to me that I'm so sorry you did this bad thing to your sister or whatever, right? We have demonized guilt and shame, right? Look, in the same way that pain is a blessing. You know why pain is a blessing? Because pain is a signal to our body that there's something broken and we better fix it. Lepers lose their central nervous system and they no longer feel pain. That's why lepers fall apart, because if you didn't feel pain, you would let yourself fall apart. Okay. In the same way that, now, of course, we live in a broken world. So if you get cancer, your pain center is going to be messed up and you're going to have to take painkillers, right? We live in a fallen world. But normally, pain is a blessing because it signals there's something wrong with our body. And if it's extreme pain, there's really something wrong with our body. Well, in the same way that pain is a signal there's something wrong with our body, guilt and shame are signals that there's something wrong with our soul. And we better listen to it if we don't want to become a monster. But we have demonized the shame and the guilt. Nobody should feel shame. Nobody should feel guilt. That's why you would have thought it would have ended with gay marriage. No, that's why we want you to be forced to approve of it, because I don't want to feel ashamed at all. Well, they wouldn't need to do that to us unless they were feeling ashamed, right? Because it's a natural thing. It's It's a natural. It's the gag reflex, we call it, that stops you from eating putrid meat. Because there's a gag reflex. But if you lost that, you might eat it and die. Right? So now, of course, we can sear our conscience if we don't listen to the Holy Spirit. But our job as educators is to instill so they come to love that which is lovely and hate that which is hateful. That is both Plato and Aristotle say that, and he quotes it in Abolition of Man. Both of them say that. That is the kind of person we're making so that then they can become virtuous, morally self-regulating citizens, which should be the goal of education, particularly in a democracy, to create virtuous, morally self-regulating citizens. I hope that when your son is 18, your wife won't still be holding his hand to cross the street. I hope by then he will have internalized the sense of safety that you need. Of course, nowadays, when it's changing, I run across the street and I look back and my kids are still there. So they're safer than I am.
Yeah.
The 30-year-olds, right, are safer than I am. Come on, let's go, right? But it's kind of funny. But that's the idea. That's what we need to educate, right? Oh, here, I'll give a challenge to your listeners. How many of you have said, why do my kids listen to that crap? Of course, you mean music, right? Whenever I hear that, I say, well, when your kids were growing up, did you ever once go over to the stereo or whatever the heck makes music in your house now and put on good music and listen with your kids? And they'll be like, no. Well, then why do you, if all you listen to is what's on the radio, in other words, you have no musical discernment of any kind, then why do you expect your kids to? They're going to just listen to whatever's on their radio station, right? You have to model for them. When my kids were young, I would be playing classical music, but I would also play, Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. We listened to Disney songs when they were good. We would listen to Celtic music, all sorts of things. It wasn't just one thing, Broadway music. But enjoy it together. That's it. Most parents never do that. They never put on good music. If they do anything, it's the radio. But even that they don't tend to do nowadays. Well, what do you expect your kids to do?
Yeah.
If you offer no role model, if they don't see, why should they love learning if they see that you don't love learning? If they see that you don't want to read at all, then why the heck should they read at all? They need to see the joy you take when you read the books out loud to them. And by the way, don't stop reading to your kids once they're able to read. Keep reading to your kids. It's very important. It's a bonding experience. Read as a family. In the old days, the Victorian days, they'd have Charles Dickens. They passed the book around. They'd all read it out loud. That's what you should do. Learn to do voices. How to learn to do different voices and stuff like that to make it exciting. They need to see that. That's how we build the chest, right? We don't build the chest by giving them participation trophies, right? We build the chest by giving them a good kind of competition that pushes them, not unrealistically, but pushes them to achieve and to take great joy when they're given. The guy that used to run our honors college said, here, my son has this giant trophy and he has this dirty little baseball. But he couldn't care about that big trophy because it was given to him for participating. That little thing was given to him for being the best in the game. And he treasures that more than the big trophy, right? The bling, the shiny thing, right?
Yeah.
So we need to do that, instill that as well in them. I mean, stories do that. To go back to what we've been talking about, both these podcasts, story does that. And that's why we've got to protect our stories and fairy tales from those who would deconstruct them. And I don't know. I just still don't know what to make of Maleficent and all that sort of stuff. It's just, but we want less of that. We want more of real fairy tales. Again, but that doesn't mean they're not scary. The kids need to know there are dragons, but they also know that the dragons can be defeated.
Yeah. So we got about 6 minutes left.
Okay.
So final words, or give us a preview on Aristotle to Christ.
Okay.
Because we could clip that as well.
Okay.
And put that out as a separate clip.
I already did Plato to Christ, showing how
this is your new book, by the way. It comes out in September. You can pre-order it right now.
Yeah, it's about a month from now. And so, I started with Achilles to Christ and then Plato to Christ. This, I go through Aristotle, but the difference is in Plato to Christ, I covered all of Plato's thought, and then I showed how it influenced the Christians. Can't do that with Aristotle because he wrote on every different area of life. So I break it into 5 areas. This is what Aristotle said. Then we go forward, and then we go back and forth, because he's basically Aristotle invented the modern university where you choose a major to major in. He's the one that wrote a book or he wrote a treatise on everything there was: poetics, ethics, physics, politics. I mean, all of his books, he kind of broke all the different disciplines into branches and stuff like that. Extremely systematic thinker. And so I go through that, and I show everything, but the most important thing is really Aristotle, the ethicist. First of all, even though it's in Plato, Aristotle really gave us more of the cosmological model that influenced Aquinas and Dante and C.S. Lewis. So I go over that. But he also talked about ethics. And we said, boy, he's the one that said virtue is not a feeling, virtue is an action that when practiced becomes a habit. And, okay, Mere Christianity, book 1, an argument for theism. Book 2, an argument for Christianity. Book 3, how to live the Christian life. Book 4, Christian theology. Book 3 relies heavily on Aristotle because Aristotle got it right. He didn't know about salvation, right? By the way, one of the biggest mistakes in Plato is Plato still thought about our body, our soul trapped in our body. You can see Aristotle, it's called hylomorphism, moving towards something that's almost incarnational, not quite there, but that we are in flesh souls. That, there's an individual soul and an individual body, and that's why there is no reincarnation in Aristotle, because it's impossible, because we're a form and a matter put together incarnationally. Whereas Plato allows, although he only does it in his myths, allows for reincarnation. But Aristotle doesn't. So theologically, there's many ways in which Aristotle is closer. But it's really his ethics, his poetics, understanding the nature of beauty and how to write a tragedy and all these sorts of things. So it's tough. Aristotle also laid the foundation of logic. I do that first. That's the hardest part. I try to get it over and do as much as I can to give lots of explanations. It's difficult. But it's, the whole idea of the law of non-contradiction, that A cannot equal B in the same way and at the same time. Right? That's the foundation of everything, right? Things were starting to get crazy that they were getting rid of that. Oh no, that's a racist way of thinking. The equal sign is racist, right? No. Okay, you need this logic on which to build everything else. And so, again, I talk about it, and I show how he influenced obviously Lewis, Aquinas, Dante, but many others. I mean, I bring in Descartes, and I bring in Kant, of course, and I bring in Chaucer, and everybody. I try to have a wide range of how Aquinas. Okay, my Plato book was called From Plato to Christ, How Plato Shaped the Christian Faith. From Aristotle to Christ, How Aristotle Clarified the Christian Faith. He really helped us with terminology and the way you break things up and the way you segment the soul. And again, he's a little bit more common sense than Plato, but he still is someone who believes in the invisible realm. He's still a supernaturalist, right? It's just that the forms, rather than being up there, the forms are within. That's the telos. The form is within. Every creature or thing has a purpose that it needs to manifest. And again, a lot of that is moving pretty well towards Christianity. I start with the biography and everything like that, but we need to understand, because Aristotle's a harder, and I challenge myself, because everyone is either a Platonist or an Aristotelian. I am definitely a Platonist, but I'm like, I got to do Aristotle. So I spent a whole year rereading all the Aristotle, doing all that stuff, and we got to get to the core of understanding it. And I use as much layman terms as I can. I even made some graphs that I don't usually do, and figures and things like that, because I want. A lot of PhDs, I don't think they want to be understood. I want to be understood. I want the person. It's probably going to be somebody with a college education, but it doesn't have to be in philosophy or English or history. It could be in anything. It could be in business, engineering. Somebody that wants to learn and understand why Aristotle is so great. What is the legacy? What does it mean? Why it is important for the way we still look at God and man and the universe and all that sort of stuff. So like I said, that comes out in the middle of September. Plato to Christ is already out, and that looks again at his myths and all that sort of stuff. But it's all part of my goal to bring Athens and Jerusalem together. That God knows what he's doing, and we can learn a lot from the pagan classics as we watch them move upward into the fullness of Christ and the New Testament.
Dr. Louis Markos.
Wow.
I wish we had 2 more hours.
I know. This is great. This is great stuff. Brought a Houston boy up to Minnesota. It was pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, except it's still pretty hot. But anyway.
It is still pretty hot.
Especially in this room.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. God bless and cheers.
Thanks. Good to be on here.
Yep.